It's been over a year since the U.S. officially withdrew from Afghanistan. Some of it was overshadowed by the strike on Zawahiri, obviously Ukraine, and all of that is happening. But it's important to think about not only what happened, but what is continuing to happen since we left. So we got the guest, Adam Weinstein of the Quincy Institute. Let's go ahead and bring him in here. Adam, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So there's a new report that you guys put out. Let's put it up there on the screen about strategic patience to sustainable engagement with a changed Afghanistan. Just give us a little bit of a rundown on what exactly has happened in Afghanistan since the U.S. pulled out, our policy, how is the nation faring, and what should we do about it?
Well, I think it's an uncertain time in Afghanistan because the country was basically operating off of a war economy. In other words, much of the economy in Afghanistan was related to the U.S. military intervention and other countries as well, such as bulk fuel shipping and things like that. And it was also an aid-dependent economy. And so once the withdrawal occurred, a lot of that aid went away, although over time it came back. And of course, the war economy evaporated. And so the real economy of the country is quite underdeveloped. And in addition to that, sanctions that were intended for the Taliban as a terrorist organization became sanctions on the Taliban as the de facto government overnight, which is kind of an unprecedented situation in sanctions history. And in addition to that, the foreign exchange reserves of the central bank were frozen. So that created a liquidity crisis. Well, there were other causes of that as well.
So the idea of our sanctions on the Taliban, which, as you said, is now the acting government of Afghanistan, was intended to sort of compel better behavior. Has that worked?
I don't think it has, and that's what we have to remember about sanctions. Sanctions are not intended just for bad guys. Sanctions are intended to change the behaviors of bad guys in a very simple way, right? Mm-hmm. And the problem with putting sanctions into force is that once you employ sanctions, it's very hard to rescind them because the question will be, well, what's changed? In the case of the Taliban, not much. You know, they still abuse human rights. They still have connections to Al-Qaeda. But the sanctions really aren't changing the Taliban's behavior. They're just hurting the people of Afghanistan. So what the Treasury Department has tried to do is create all these sanctions exemptions by issuing things called general licenses. But that doesn't get around the chilling effect of the sanctions.
Mm-hmm. And so, look, in terms of policy, what you lay out here, what are the risks of the current Biden administration's posture?
I think the risks of the current posture that we're a little bit disengaged. We've still contributed a significant amount of aid to the country, but our diplomats aren't on the ground. The sanctions are in full effect, aside from the general licenses that I mentioned. And we're really not engaged enough, I think. For the last 20 years, we were too engaged through a military intervention, and now the pendulum has swung all the way to the other direction. And if Afghanistan becomes a failed state, I think that's a problem for the region and the security of the world. Certainly, we don't want to see a Taliban-led Afghanistan, but that's the reality we have to live with right now, and it's still a better reality than a failed state.
Mm-hmm. What is the reality, the humanitarian reality for the Afghan people, and how much did our decision to freeze the nation's central bank reserves, how much is that contributing to that humanitarian crisis?
Well, it's contributing in the sense that the central bank can't regulate the economy the way a central bank typically would, and there's a bit of a liquidity crisis. I think we have to remember that even if the sanctions were lifted tomorrow and the frozen foreign exchange reserves were returned the same day, the economy would still be in dire straits. Much of this has to do with the fact that Afghanistan is landlocked, the Taliban are mismanaging things, but we are adding to that harm, and I think that's something we have to be cognizant of.
Yeah. Well, I think you lay out a pretty compelling case for, how exactly to go forward. Everybody supposedly cared a lot on withdrawal, and then after about 3 months, it evaporated. But those people still live there, of course, and, it's always going to exist no matter whether we like it or not. Really appreciate you joining us, Adam. Very informative. Thank you. Thank you guys so much for watching. Really appreciate it. As we mentioned, stay tuned. Tomorrow, we are going to have Krystal's live reaction with Dan Marins on the New York primaries. Thank you all to our premium subscribers. You guys enable all the technical stuff that makes sure that that can happen and that we can get that to you as soon as possible. So we deeply appreciate your support. Don't forget, we're coming to Atlanta September 16th. Live show tickets will be in the description as well. And if you want to help us out, become a premium member today. Link is down there in the description. We deeply appreciate you guys, your support, and we have some fun things coming down the pipeline. I think that you all are really going to enjoy it. We will see you all on Thursday.
Love you guys. See you soon. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.